morning and welcome to our UBC Learning Circle, connecting birth through transformation, a collective vision of connection and inclusion with the Kilila Birth Collective. Today's conversation is presented in partnership with the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health and the Kilila Birth Collective. We would love to thank the First Nations Health Authority for generously funding the UBC Learning Circle and allowing us to have these conversations. Before we formally begin, I would like to acknowledge with respect and gratitude that I'm joining you from the unceded territories of the Syilx people. Please feel free to introduce yourselves and the nation you're calling in from in the chat box below. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarain Squawkin. I'm the new Learning Circle Manager. I'll be your moderator for today's discussion, and joining us today behind the scenes is Cynthia Long, our production coordinator. She'll be in the background interacting with everyone in the chat. And finally, before we get into today's discussion, I'd just like to provide a gentle heads up that the topics covered may be sensitive or emotionally triggering. Please make sure that you are looking after yourself, and if at any point you feel that you need to talk to a friend, elder, counselor, or family member, don't hesitate to do so. We have some prompts in the chat for you if you need additional support. I'll turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yesenia. I am Ojibwe and Cree from Ontario on my mother's side, and my dad is from El Salvador. I live on, I'm coming from Burnaby, so the territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And I am a full spectrum birth keeper, or in other words, doula, for those who don't know, and a prenatal educator. I'm also a mom of 4. My kids are 13, 8, 5, and 2.5. Thank you.
Marty, do you want to go next?
Ayat sweet. Isquis haiketko. Ur kin silch. Ur French Canadian. Ur Inyapichen. Story kikan mut nacham sing pikten tul tem tulau. Ur Chilks is squasquasi or Intum, Jackie Collins is squeezed, in Mistum, Richard Turner is squeezed, in Kahap, Sarah Pierre is squeezed. Why ihi? I was just speaking in very baby in Khalilah, which is the language of the Syilx Nation people, where I am from, that I am English, French Canadian, and Syilx. I have 5 children. I am calling from the territory of Kwantlen Nation in Surrey, and my mom is Jackie Turner, and my father Richard, and my great-grandmother is Sarah Pierre.
I'll get Stacy to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Sinead Taluit, other known as Stacy Williams. My father's side is Squamish Nation and Nanaimo Nation, and my mom's side is Kwakwakiwak and Haisla. I'm here in the unceded territories of the Kwantlen, Kaitsi, Kaikait, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen First Nations, and I'm here in Surrey. I have 3 beautiful children of my own, 21, 16, and 6. And I just want to thank everyone for being here today. And I'm also part of the Kilila Birth Collective and a high-risk doula for Fralka.
Last but not least, Karen.
Thank you. My name is Karen Weingarten. I am a birth keeper with the Prenatal Collective. It's an honor to work on the shared traditional unceded territory of the Kaitsi, Semiahmoo, and other Coast Salish peoples. I am a mother of 4, one whom is in the spirit world. I have a 19-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old daughter to keep me busy. And yeah, I look forward to this chat. So thank you. Thank you.
Before we get into our discussion, I'll just bring up the questions here. First question is, How do you define Indigenous birth work and allyship?
Yeah, so I think that's a really big question. It's something that we've been, not just us, but I think many Indigenous birth workers, working towards that relationship with allies within our community, because I think specifically for us, we're not a lot of us here. We need to be able to make those relationships with other doulas, birth keepers, healthcare professionals that we're able to connect those clients with. So when we're talking about that relationship building, we're talking about the inclusion of allies into not just our community, but the communities of the families that we are potentially serving, which also brings about that accountability to each other. Yeah. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, and I think also too, the way we view our work is that it's not just work. It's a role that we happily take on within our community here on the coast. And because it's not just for work, we are members of the community. It's a very holistic, very natural way of supporting each other as Indigenous peoples from all over the territory in a good way. It's an opportunity for us to reclaim ourselves as we're working towards doing the best we can for our future generations while still honoring our elders that have come before us. We're trying to heal their hearts while we heal our hearts as we grow new people, new community in the best way that we can. And I think that it's much bigger than just, what people would think of as go to, have a baby, birthing. Like it's an entire movement of reclaiming who we are in our land. I could go on. I'm not going to. I'm sure Stace and Karen have something fantastic to say.
Okay, so we've been talking about this quite a bit, is helping the families to realize that they're in ceremony and to bring ceremony and to help honor them in their ceremony from the time of conception, right? And to just help families understand where our roots come from, and because that was taken, right? So we have to start from the ground up, and just, the part of that's missing is the circle, the family, the children are in the center, and then the moms, and then the dads and the grandparents. And that's what we need to honor, is bringing that all together. It's community, right? And just to help families realize that that's what's missing, and we can't do it all. We have to help families realize that they need their families. And yeah, I'm just babbling now, sorry.
Yeah, and in addition to what Karen was saying, understanding that birth is ceremony, right? From conception, prior to conception, within the Indigenous birth work side of it, but in the ally side, having the understanding of the history and the context of Indigenous people and within our institutions, whether that be in our school systems, in our hospital systems, or in our justice systems, and some of those are, like the residential school, the 60 scoop, the birth alerts, forced sterilization, evacuation policies, how those have impacted Indigenous people when they are on that reproductive journey of, seeking safe and adequate care during the pregnancy, but also during the labor when they're either heading to the hospital or having a birth at home, and then in that postpartum period. So I think that's a good, I think that's a good step, is to, be educating yourself and understand the context of that, and where does that inherent fear come from, and where does that, walking carefully and the distrust come from when you're working with Indigenous families.
So just with our families, like we also have to work with them very, like a lot of them are high risk. So they've come from a lot of trauma. They've come from, a background where they've got a lot of trauma and addiction, and we have to work with them where they're at, and walk with them and resource them and let them know that they're not alone, right? And that we're here to support them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on to that as well. So it's not so much that these families are high risk, it's that they've been put into situations that have made them vulnerable, right? There are socioeconomic barriers that are present, which are financial, childcare, food security, housing security, and those intergenerational traumas for the generation of people who didn't go to residential school or didn't have parents taken by the 60s scoop or whatnot, but that are living through that in our current day. So yeah, just to say that they're not high risk people, but they have been put into high risk situations based on the institutions and the systems that we live in.
And to even expand on that, when we're talking about families, individuals in situations that they didn't expect to find themselves in, and we're learning to walk in a good way, it's not only for Indigenous peoples. As you're learning these skills and how to move forward, it's just good for all people, everyone, irregardless of your nationality or your heritage. Remembering that we all are just people, and we have to be gentle with each other, and we have to honor each other, and that is healing, irregardless of any situation.
I'll kind of chip in now. So I just want to second all my sisters here in regards of what they were saying, but in regards of allyship, supporting families and working with allies is very, very important, because not everyone is, the ally is at a space and place where they understand of the traumas and the vulnerable situations that our Indigenous families are in. So making that space safe for our families in regards of connecting with allies and collaboration, just making sure that, they will have that proper support, and, in regards to the situation of, what the allies aware. So really who we work with in supporting our families is really important to us, and also, introducing our family to an ally. But in the end, we try to support and blanket our families with as much resource as we can, so they're not alone. We obviously go above and beyond, usually our spectrum, because that's just all comes from the heart and the passion of our work. And so when we work, we work together and support each other, and we all have different type of connections, whether it's with, her ally or this ally. And then in the end, like I said, we all get to know each other, have that beautiful circle that we can wrap around, support our families with. So again, just building that relationship and the connection with that ally to secure that, trust that our family will have to, obviously confide in that ally. So sometimes it's not an easy thing, but, things just, it takes time and, and some reassurance, and eventually we get where we need to get when when we get there at our time and pace, just as long as, you know, with our families as well. So that's my little feedback.
Yeah, and I just want to add a couple more things. This is a question that comes up, sorry, this is a question that comes up a lot, I think, in a lot of discussions when it comes to not just birth work, but in general healthcare with Indigenous people and, you know, the healthcare setting. And, you know, I throw the question back to you, like, what does it mean to you to be an ally? What does that look like for you? And, you know, maybe it is those steps of walking into a room with a client, a patient, and walking in with the understanding that everyone in this world is carrying trauma, you know, and to walk in with that trauma-informed lens and to understand that you may be walking into a situation where a family is really struggling, or maybe they don't have the trust that's there, you know. So walking into that room with the understanding that everyone is carrying some trauma of some sort, and to understand and accept that you're not necessarily entitled to know what that is, to be a part of that. You're just there as a support, whether it's a healthcare worker or even as a birth worker, to meet that client or that family where they're at. And then it's that critical reflection of yourself too, before working or walking alongside a family. What are your biases? What are your prejudices? You know, what are things that you need to work on within you before you step into an environment with a family? Yeah, being intuitive as well. So being able to read that body language, you know, is that person uncomfortable with the way that you're standing or sitting or talking to them? So being aware of the self-awareness for yourself as well needs to be there. Yeah, asking open-ended questions and making sure that, you know, you're not putting a person in a cornered position where they feel unsafe, and to know that that cultural safety or that trauma-informed care or that allyship is going to be deemed not by you, but from the client or the family. They're the ones that have that autonomy over themselves to say, yes, this person was a safe place, or no, they're not, irregardless of if you've had a training or if you believe yourself to be culturally safe. It's not a decision that's made by you.
And I know everyone in a helping profession goes in wanting to help in from a very honest place and a good place. And sometimes due to different systems that are placed over us, sometimes we lose sight of the human aspect of different care providers' job. Is that the word is care provider, not fixer of everything. And it's not to make light of anyone's education or qualifications. In fact, we absolutely desperately need them and respect and honor all the specialists and everyone, what they bring. However, at the end of the day, we all are our own autonomous individuals. And the best thing we can do for everyone is to offer evidence-based information, very good support, and walk alongside all of our families, all of our people, and let them know that they are supported and that people are able to make their own decisions. Absolutely able to make their own decisions. And we should honor that. And we should celebrate that, because it's very if you're not, then you're taking away someone's choice, and therefore ask yourself, then are you responsible for the outcome of those choices? You know, I feel it's best to offer the information in a good way and support families as they would like and as they need.
That's a good point, Mine. I always encourage our families to use their voices. So it's not an easy thing to do sometimes, especially when you're in the medical field, when you go into hospital, when you go into appointments, you feel kind of overwhelmed with anxiety, and you tend to kind of shut down a little bit, and you just let them talk and don't have, maybe sometimes somewhat of an understanding, just because you have so much anxiety, you don't, sometimes the comprehension and isn't there. And I get like that sometimes too myself. Like even coming on today, I'm like, oh my God, I have so much anxiety. Even though I've done this so many times, I still get like that. And so just encouraging, I always encourage the families to always speak up and use their voice. You got this. This is your decision. This is what you want. And so it's so beautiful to hear them speak in the end, oh, no, thank you, I don't want that, or no, this is what I want, or this is what I need. And so it's really heartfelt when I hear them actually speak up, and I'm like, right on, like, good for you, so yeah, so that's a good point, Mark.
Yeah, and it's hard to not be protective, and it's hard to not be protective when we're walking with families. But like I said earlier, we're not a lot of us here in this collective, and we need that support from our community. We need those doulas and birth keepers that we could reach out to that can possibly take on the family support, because it's an overwhelming response sometimes, and we just don't have the capacity or the ability to be everywhere and see everything and support everyone. So here at our group, like, the hope is that we're going to be able to make these connections with our community and have those community members want to be a part of the work that we're doing and want to join us in activities, or come to our prenatal classes, or come to our Zoom meetings, so that we can get to know you and know you as a person and feel comfortable and safe with you, so that we can pass on families to you for support. Like, how else are we going to make these connections between us and allies if we don't know you, right? It all starts up with relationship building, and that trust that needs to be built, right? So it's that accountability to your community, is that accountability to your colleagues, or your other birth workers in the community, to be present, to be available, and to really have that commitment to walk alongside other Indigenous birth workers and families as well.
That engage in open, honest circles and conversations as we are now. We all have the similar goal. We all have a similar way of working, but it's not exactly, all the details are not exactly the same. And that is okay. And that is good. And that's needed. But we do need to be all on the same page and be in relationship. And that's a lovely opportunity for myself. I know I've learned so much from my sisters here in the collective, and through my journey through colonial institutions and different professors, and that I've taken courses from, for university and such. All those experiences I hold very dear, because they've not all been easy. In fact, some of them have been very hard. But I take those experiences and learn from them as best as I can. And so happy to join in community with other people. So whatever knowledge we have, we're more happy to share, and to broaden our community, to make our everything more safe and more dignified for everyone.
Wow, that's really great. I liked how you guys are more relational in your practice, and how you champion your patients to have a voice, and describing what an ally means to you as a collective is really powerful, and I think it's really much needed in our community right now. But yeah, I will move on to the next question. How is birth work integrated into families' experiences? Like family-centered support, an extension of the parent-baby dyad, and community building.
I'll just lead us into that question. Yeah, so we are full spectrum birth keepers, which means we follow and support families along the spectrum of pregnancy, whether that is a pregnancy that turns into a birth, a spontaneous release of the pregnancy, a conscious release of a pregnancy, and everything in between. So, being that essentially first point of contact and support allows us to build that relationship with that family and whatever journey that they're onto. And usually we are following them through those situations and then in a postpartum period. So postpartum period would mean anything after a pregnancy. It doesn't matter what the route was taken. And we become that like extension, that resource person that they can go to, connection with other families that have gone through similar journeys. So that's one way that we integrate our support into their life. Of course, if it is requested by them or if it is something that they want or need, that's not always the case.
So for me, supporting families, like Yesenia was saying, I meet them and then we just go from there. I mean, we've had some that like she says have miscarriages or termination or births, or like it's such a diverse thing because some of them come from transition homes and some of them come from it's a full spectrum of people. So yeah, we just honor them and we just promote First Nation spiritual practices and uphold the values and honor and respect which it serves and promotes healthy, serene living. So yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. That was beautiful. So some of our families they're from all sorts of different places. Some people are, urban Indigenous families who are disconnected from their own nation, from wherever they are, all across the territories. And then there's other families that are currently receiving other kinds of supports, like Karen was saying. And then there's, families that are just, regular, suburban individuals with just want extra Indigenous aunties around them. And, there's nothing different about any family that we walk differently in any situation. We treat everybody the exact same, and the part I really enjoy connecting with our families is that we keep in touch because we are community members and we see our families often, at different events, at different, at birthday parties, online, Facebook, texts, years and years after the fact, I'll still get a text, Auntie, what do you think of 222? And I'm like, what's happening? And so it's really nice, it's probably my favorite part. I love birth, of course, but staying in touch with everyone and watching everyone grow, it's wonderful. It's an unexpected extra. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And we walk in a way as like Marnie said, like we're your aunties or we're your friends or we're your, sisters or whatever name suits you, right? Like we're not walking into these relationships with families as like a hierarchy, breaking down those power imbalances of, the scope of practice of a doula, right? Like we're not walking into those situations with that light. We're walking into, let's go on this journey together, and you let me know where you need the support, and I'm going to help provide that support. And then understanding that we are just one person, and so this is why we have a collective, so that we can lean on each other and bring in that extra support for that family if it's needed. So we're, yeah, like the idea of the base of integrating ourselves into, you know, families is just creating that open space where they're inviting us into their family, and we're also inviting them into our family for that continued relationship if they so choose to have that, you know, past the postpartum period. We're here, we're open. And like Marnie said, yeah, sometimes, you know, we see these families at other events or activities, we become friends, and some of them become birth keepers with us too. So there's that opportunity of building that relationship and that connection, and then, you know, opening pathways or new journeys for them to take what they've learned in their pregnancy and in their journey, and maybe they want to be that person for someone else as well. So it's like a very long lasting, very cyclical journey of, you know, conception to birth to postpartum, and then integrating them into the communities, or integrating them into our communities as well.
I love that, Yesenia. Yeah, so with the support that we provide is, like she said, is full spectrum. So before, during, and after, whether it's an in-hospital birth or a home birth. And if it's a home, we provide everything they need to make that successful for them in their birth plan. And also with postpartum, we also can support with like postnatal stuff as well. So in regards of the grant funding that we do that we utilize quite often for our Indigenous families, there's a space where we can do support with the birth itself. And then there's also space to hold some extra postpartum support in regards to funding wise. So it's pretty open of what we can support with, which is great. That's amazing. We have that go-to for our families. And so that way they're not left alone, and they feel the support. And, you know, sometimes when you know, feel really overwhelmed, it leads to, you know, deep postpartum depression. And, you know, kind of reading and seeing all that beforehand, just having our extra support for that family is it's phenomenal. Like, we're really grateful to have that source. And then us as birth keepers, we have our collective to kind of lean back on and know that this work is not held alone for us as well. So we kind of have to debrief upon each other. Hey, can you talk today? You know, so we as a collective are also here to support one another as, you know, our sisters. And then we just kind of also wrap around that, you know, around our family as well. So we're supported and not alone too, but it's some beautiful work. You know, it's a lifestyle actually. And it's a passion. You have to have the love and the drive for this, you know, type of work, and, you know, having that passion. And I just had a couple of babies the last couple of days, and I honestly was, had a long one. I just got home after 3 this morning, and as tired as I am, my sister here said, "Oh wow, you look so good after you." I'm like, "Oh wow," like, because I feel good. My heart, no matter how tired my body feels, my heart feels so good. My heart feels full of love that I was there for super duper hours supporting this mom and just being there for her and her partner. And the baby is really heartwarming for me. And that's my energy. I hold that space for them, and they hold that for me, even though they don't know, but they don't know what that does for me. But for me, it just, when I'm leaving, you know, 3 a.m. after over 24 hours, I'm just like, you know, driving along the highway already, you know, super proud, excited, happy, you know, that they had that support and that they weren't alone. And so Yeah, I just have a great day today.
Yeah, so yeah, just to add on to what Stacy was saying, the wraparound support and that community support that we hold for each other, but like that just brings me back to like allyship, right? Like that community building and falling back on each other when needed, because this is not, quote unquote work that you can do by yourself. We're mothers here in this collective where we have extracurricular activities as well, right? So we need that community care and that community support from not only each other, but from our allies as well. If, like I mentioned, if we're not able to take on a family or support them in a way that they need to, then, having that relationship and that rapport to be able to refer them out to someone who's going to provide quality care for them. But it all begins in that relationship building aspect. Like, you're not going to get anywhere if there's no relationship. And that's something that is like the cornerstone of this work, is building that relationship and doing that self-reflection. And are you the best person for this family? And even with us, we may not be the best birth keeper for a family that reaches out to us. And we know that we're able to reflect on our abilities or inabilities to support them. And then we would, say, hey, like, I got this inquiry. I don't think I'm the best person. I think you would be great for this person, right? So it's that relationship that we have with ourselves and with our collective and our colleagues, that we know that we may not be the best person. And so we're going to refer that family so that they can have that integrated support from somebody else.
There's a question. It's from someone who says anonymous. As a full spectrum birth keeper, are there other trainings, knowledge, skills that would be an asset to best support families or communities, bracket, that may not be offered in birth keeper training, i.e. first aid for doulas, prenatal education, etc., in bracket? Yes. There's lots of additional training that I think is always helpful to have. I myself am completing medicalized lactation for IBCLC within the colonial system, and looking towards completing my bachelor's of science in nursing. All those things that go along with being a Indigenous birth keeper, I find them all an asset. And it's not necessarily always medical, healthcare based knowledge that is helpful. There's a lot of other, suitable, like very, very helpful workshops and programs to do with attachment, relation building, community support, Indigenous studies. There's literally so many different aspects to doing your role as an Indigenous birth keeper well. And I would almost wonder, if you're interested in something, then perhaps that's probably the way you're supposed to go, because not everybody has the same path. And whatever you're feeling drawn towards is probably exactly where you're supposed to go.
Yeah, and just to go back to your question, like first aid for doulas, obviously that is great to have your first aid certification, no doubt, and prenatal education. I think that's really important too, because, aside from being, the birth keeper side, being able to inform and educate your clients on the medical procedures and the medical lingo, and breaking that down into something like a simplified way, so that when your client does go into, or the family you're supporting does go into their healthcare setting, that they're really fully able to understand, because you're able to debrief with them. And there is some, there is prenatal education that is typically worked into, doula trainings of all kinds. but it doesn't go into that much detail. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to certify as a prenatal educator when I first started doing birth work, was I wanted to be able to, inform the client in the best way possible. And a lot of the times it's that one-on-one connection that you have with your client or the family that they don't have with their healthcare provider. So maybe they're taking a prenatal class, or maybe they're asking these questions to their healthcare provider and they're not getting answers that are going to be translated as support to them. And so that's where I would come in, or we would come in as their birth keeper to be like, yeah, like we'll support you during this way, but also, let's break down those conversations that you had with your healthcare provider and make it so that you're able to fully understand and give that consent or give that refusal for whatever procedure is coming up. So absolutely. I also think a good training is something like nonviolent crisis training and de-escalation is good to have, especially in this profession as well. Yeah.
So for me, it's also decolonization training. That was a good one. And eat, sleep, and console training. For me, a lot of my training, not of my training, but my community work is based on volunteer in the community, working with moms. Just what really makes a difference is like just being there with them and being, education. So like me being present in infant development and being present with all sorts of things in community, that it makes them feel like you're part of their journey, not just some professional that's like, oh, you got this. You know what I mean? I don't know what I'm trying to say.
You said it beautifully, Karen. I think you said it lovely. So what I hear you saying is that not only are you encouraging the families for their own education, you're attending with them at times to different educational things, and that's beautiful. I do that myself. I do that often. We have another question. Should I read it again?
Sure.
So it says, do you have any advice to healthcare workers assisting families from a nation other than their own? How do you navigate sharing culturally relevant teachings with a diverse urban Indigenous population? In the past, we've called the nations that they're connected with, if they've wanted us to, their aunties, elders, cousins, or if sometimes there's not a connection with the nation that they're from. And so I offer my knowledge that I carry, and it just depends for that. Yesenia, I totally cut you off.
Oh yeah, no worries. Let me just read the question again.
I'll pop in.
I was just gonna say, when you're working with Indigenous families, you don't have a responsibility to teach them traditions or culture, especially if you're not from their nation, or maybe you're not Indigenous yourself, or maybe you are from somewhere else. It's not your responsibility to share that knowledge if it's not knowledge that they're wanting to have, or if it's not relevant to them. And it's just asking those open-ended questions, is this something that is important to you, and do you have access to cultural support? And if not, and they are looking for that cultural support, then it's reaching out to, your local organizations around here, maybe reaching out to an Indigenous birth worker, Indigenous midwives, or anything like that could offer more resources or information that you're not able to, but you don't have a responsibility to offer them that if that's not something that is comfortable for you, or it doesn't apply to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Yesenia. But in regards of advice to healthcare workers assisting families from a nation, basically what we're trying to do now, yeah, as a collective, but also I'm part of a different board where we're trying to introduce culturally safe training to nurses and doctors in ICUs and NICUs right now. So it's been quite a discussion the last few months, and fast acting actually to change policy. So there's over 700 policies, I think it's 701 in the medical field that, it's really strict about, this and this, and they have to go by policy everywhere they, right? Because it can come back on them. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to introduce again about ceremony, and like Karen had mentioned, starting from conception, even precede, just going through the whole pregnancy is ceremony, not just the birth itself. So we're trying to introduce the culturally safe training, like I said, to nurses and doctors, to make it mandatory for our families. So we can't, force or, this and this and this with the healthcare workers, but we can do as much as we can for our families and support them that way. And then sharing the cultural teachings, like I said, just reaching out maybe to like a friendship center, to see if there's any connections there, or if someone, has any other elders or connections in regards, personal family members or anything like that as well. So it's all kind of who and basically like word of mouth. So that's my answer for that one.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on Marnie too, like where she said, if there is no connection, then she shares what she knows, and we do that. Like we do share, what we have been taught or what we know, and we let them know, right? This is what I have learned. This is what I have taught. This is possibly what I have integrated into my own experience, and then we leave it up to the family to make that ultimate decision if that's something that they would like to carry on or not.
Not every family is interested in having different parts of culture or ceremony within their birth or postnatally. So it's very, if I was not in my role, say I was a doctor and I was trying to be culturally attuned to my family, I would probably be gentle in how I brought up the conversation, opening that conversation with them about if they would like something more culturally appropriate or something that I'm not aware of within their birth, because sometimes opening that might be a little sensitive because of the many traumas that our families have gone through. So as with everything, being gentle in how you walk, I think, is extremely valuable.
We just have another question from one of our guests, and it's, are you as birth keepers connected to and/or support the work of Indigenous midwives?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just did a birth with one of our Indigenous midwives. Her name is Keisha. So we work along closely with a Huckleberry midwifery here, Strathcona in Vancouver. And yeah, so we definitely collaborate a lot. So we get a lot of referral. We do a lot of referral to them as well. And so just supporting each other, as Indigenous families, and then having Indigenous midwives and Indigenous birth keepers is just a super dream come true for most, of our families. And we're really fortunate to have that support and, working together. It's just, we kind of read each other, we know each other, we kind of come from a different lens supporting, you know, our families. And so basically, again, like it was coming from an ally, sometimes the lens is a little bit different than ours. And so when we come in, we just kind of know, you know, we feel, we know, we just that energy, you know, holding that space for them. And so, yeah, we work together quite closely, and it's amazing. It's just so different. Like it's so different when I'm going into like a hospital setting, and you know, it's just a regular like OB or GP or, you know, whichever, right? Like, and then when you come in with, you know, our midwives that we work together, the energy is so different in there. I'm just like, woo, I'm like, woo, anyways, all the time, but it's just so much more light, like, you know, and especially for our mamas, like, you know, just holding and feeling that energy, like it's just such a different world in there. So it was like a beautiful, like ceremonial celebration. You know, we had like bumping music on, like we were just doing all, you know, and then whether sometimes with some settings, like it's just, you can just tell the difference, right? So yeah, beautifully work together all the time. So that's been a beautiful question.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like Stacey said, Keisha from the Huckleberry team, and prior to that, Tia was also from Huckleberry team. We have another birthkeeper sister that's in Kamloops, Sage from Yalal Birth. So she's into her first year of midwifery school, and our very own collective sister Rayanne is in her, is it second year? Yeah, second year of midwifery school. So she's also part of our collective, but she's off busy doing all the student midwife stuff right now. So yeah, absolutely. We are in connection, and we love working with Indigenous midwives. Like Stacey said, it's just like heading out to, you know, a birthday party, which it is, right? It is a birthday party at the end of it. Yeah. And us as well. Like I know we have some aspirations for ourselves to get into midwifery. So those are some future goals that we have for our collective as well.
I like that birthday.
Yeah, with the
party.
midwifery stuff too, we're hoping to open like a birthing center. So having, you know, as the collective support the birthing center, having the midwives come and do shifts and things like that, so our families can birth in the birthing center home setting instead of going into hospital, or not having the home or the space in their own home for a home birth. They can come and birth in the birthing center. So that's our vision and our goal the next little bit here, and I'm positive it's going to happen.
I was actually having a conversation this morning with another one of our colleagues, Karina, and we were talking about, I'm going to do this up. We got to do the grant writing thing to get this birth home, because it's a vision and we've been talking about it way too long. We have to do it. It's going to be done. So let it be done.
Yeah, I think we had another question in the Q&A. So thank you for this forum. I'm a doula connected with the Doulas for Aboriginal Families grant program. I'd like to have more training for cultural awareness. What can you recommend as a place to learn more? The Doulas for Aboriginal Family grant program did put out a cultural safety training. It'll take you about an hour or so. So if you didn't get the link and that's something that you want to take a look at, you can email the doula program there. It does have a deadline of like May 1st, I believe. So that's next week. There's also another organization called Sanyas, which does an Indigenous cultural safety training as well. I have not taken that, so I can't speak on that. And a couple years ago, we did organize a cultural safety training with FRAFCA and Transformations in Surrey, and they put on an amazing cultural safety training. It was a 2-day training with us there and other community members that we're interested in doing that. So I'm not sure if that's something that could be rearranged again, or how that would look. So that's my input on that. Anyone else?
So for me, I want to talk about how the missing piece again is elders, our elders. That's where we learn this stuff from. And yeah.
Oh, that's great, Karen, because taking a course is not enough.
Yeah.
You have to walk in it, and it takes time. And I know for myself, I'm learning every day how to be a better human. Think of it that way, honestly. And culturally, we do learn from our elders. They carry a lot of knowledge. They carry a different way of looking at things, and that has to be valued. So there's many different colonial and also indigenously inspired courses you can take. But mentorship, working within community, we really advocate mentorship. We have birth keepers that would like to be birth keepers within our collective, and we mentor them. We all mentor them. We take them to births. We take them with us when we teach prenatal, because we all teach prenatal with our families, and postnatal. And we meet weekly with each other. It's a constant learning and constant mentorship. So it's just an ongoing, natural, holistic process that we all engage in some form.
We have another question from a guest in the chat. So, hi everyone, I'm a neonatologist, baby doctor who cares for infants born early or with problems after birth, working in Regina. I'm wanting to try to make our family room and our unit a place that is more culturally welcoming and culturally safe for Indigenous and Métis clients. I have some ideas of my own, and I'll be meeting with our partners in FN and MHS to discuss, but wondered if you had any suggestions for me or perhaps any resources.
Go to your local nation and find out who the elders are and whose territory you're on. And I would start there and ask to speak to the elders and see what's appropriate for that area, that nation. And, come with treats, bring some food, bring some a little gift. Like if you're going to go say elders, make sure you're doing whatever proper protocol it is. Oh, on Treaty 4 territory. Oh, good. I don't know what the protocols are for Treaty 4, but if you call the band office, I'm sure, or the territory office, you can say, and you're coming from a good place, that's beautiful, that, this is what my vision is. I would really love to make the whole experience for our families and our little neonates better. How can I do that in a good way? And if you come from that place, I think it's lovely. I think it's just wonderful what you're doing. And yes, I'm inspired that you're doing that. So thank you. That's great. But I would start with the territory that you're on and ask them directly. Wonderful.
So I just had a question about that question. When you're asking, what are some ways that it can become culturally welcoming or inviting? What does it currently look like? Like what are some of the aspects that are in that room? Or like that's a question I have when you have that question, how to make it more welcoming. What does it currently look like? What are the facilities that you have in that room, or what's being offered in that room? What does that look like?
That's a good point, Yesenia. So basically having that sacred space, right? Holding that space for our Indigenous families is what is in there to provide them that of their beliefs. So some people, brush off with cedar, or some people smudge with sweetgrass or sage, or depends. And when you're in a hospital setting, obviously, even us here, we can't be burning sweet grass and sage, you know, in hospital because of the smoke detectors, all that kind of stuff. So is there a safe space where they can go if they want to smudge beforehand, that has no smoke detectors? And so I'm just reading what you say. Isn't comfortable or welcoming in any way. There's chairs, table, wall with pamphlet lockers, sink. White walls, well, make it pretty. Do the best you can, even just holding that space for them for somewhere to go. Just indigenize it more and add some more beautiful things, you know, medicine wheels or, you know, anything like that. And also, you know, sometimes having an elder present. So is there an elder that you work with that can be a part of the support that's there? And again, what Martin said is just going to the elders and asking what the protocol is. So whether you go and see them, what we do here is we provide like a blanket. So when we go see families, we give a blanket, you know, and thanks, you know, warm love, wrap them around. And then maybe you guys, you know, provide tobacco or, you know, the smudge kit, you know, whichever. I'm not positive what your space looks like over there, but those are things that we do here. And again, if you want to reach out, Yesenia, you should put your email in the chat box maybe. And then if anyone else has any other questions or anything like this, Dawn, we can kind of maybe meet as a collective and then meet with you and then support you outside of this with maybe other resources we can kind of look into as well.
Yeah, just to add on to your response there of the room, it's quite plain and uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah, just making that space comfortable. Get some really comfy chairs, a really plush rocking chair. Marnie mentioned earlier is having food available there. That is, food is medicine, and it's often a very, very respectful way to show somebody that you're caring about them is offering food. So whether that looks like packaged food because of, you know, the pandemic or whatever, fresh fruit, but having that available, you know, you have like a teapot, a coffee pot, stuff like that, but just making it comfortable and then reaching out to the local nation. And I see that you commissioned a Métis artist for painting the walls. That's great, right? So
Yes.
Things that are going to be relevant to the territory that you're on, the nations that you're sitting on, and, you know, the local communities that are there, which I know you mentioned that you're going to be reaching out to. So that's a great first step. And then just making that space comfortable. Nobody wants to go into a family space and sit on a plastic hard chair, especially there's likely going to be younger children there as well with those families. Yeah, you got the right idea. It's going to be great.
Having those families maybe implement like meeting in that room and build relation with those clients before that becomes a sacred place. Like the sacred space is where they feel safe, right? Going into a place that isn't sacred isn't really sacred, even if you make it all pretty. You know, just building relationship with them is making a sacred space. You can't bring a sacred space. Like, yeah. Anyway.
Beautifully said, Karen. Relationships are sacred. People, humans are sacred. We are sacred. You are sacred. And that's beautifully said. You can't, just like taking a course, it's not a box you tick off. You do your best to create the environment, and the people is what makes things community and sacred. Beautifully said, Karen.
Thank you, Marnie.
We have one last question in our list here. And how does Kilila Birth Collective support and advocate preventative responses?
Yeah, so that's the next question, I believe, right? So when we're talking about how are we advocating to promote preventative responsive or to be, you know, the first step in prevention, we're talking about advocacy work. So for the client advocacy work. So not just as doulas, or not just as birth keepers, but being that extra layer of support when these families are having their meetings with their care providers or entering into the hospital system to give birth. Being that extra layer there, which is generally just being present there for those care providers to see us and for us to be that extra set of hands or that extra set of eyes. And oftentimes people are in vulnerable positions when they are entering into these institutions by themselves. And so our roles here are to accompany our families, to the prenatal meetings if we're able to, or if they want us to go with them, then we make ourselves available. And then being accountable to ourselves within those meetings. And that ultimately rubs off on the healthcare provider that they need to walk in an accountable way. So that's the extra layer of protection that we're talking about, is being that extra person, that extra witness, those extra eyes, when those families are accessing services where they could be in a very vulnerable position if they do go alone, or if they're birthing in the hospital alone.
Yeah.
That's actually a huge part of what we do, bearing witness to our families, real life lived experiences, and providing an extra layer of familiarity, comfort, support, allyship with them. And as well, I have to say, the care providers that I have had the privilege of working with our families, they're appreciative of us as well, because it's very, very difficult to provide the excellent level of care that I've seen every care provider want to provide. If someone is not able, if the family is not able to absorb the very good information that the care provider is giving for whatever reason, then quite often within whatever appointment we're in, I'm able to bridge that. And I'm able to speak in a way that the family is able to understand. And if we're not able to come to an understanding within that appointment, then at least the care provider knows that I understand what they've said. I've repeated it as much as I can to the family. And then the family has the proper good information that they need to make the best decisions for themselves. So it's been very positive for all sorts of reasons. Very preventative, very holistic, very helpful.
Yeah.
Those have been my experiences.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, so with the preventative outlook of this, we're trying to support that family so that, like Marnie said, to make those decisions for themselves, so that they're able to make that informed consent or that informed refusal for whatever is being presented to them. And if there's a misunderstanding or a miscommunication, or there's some biases or prejudice, microaggressions, whatever is happening in that room or not happening in that room is going to affect that person's, remainder of their pregnancy, that birth, and their postpartum, which could lead them into situations that are unwanted, or procedures being done to their body or baby that are unwanted or not medically necessary. So that's where we come in, right? This is where we come in, walking with them in the early prenatal period or in the late prenatal period, depending on when we make those connections, and continuing to walk beside them through the entire journey, far into their postpartum, so they have that extra layer there. Some families don't have extra support. They don't have families, they don't have friends, they don't have connections to organizations. And sometimes they just don't have the trust to build those connections. And so that's where we come in. We fill those gaps, we make those bridges, as Marnie was saying.
That's exactly right. And then also, we also get even referral for families that get medevac down from remote communities that don't have any support. And so sometimes we're meeting the family, they come into town and we're meeting them, and within a couple of days, they're getting induced. And so it's just, you know, having somebody there, because if we weren't there, they wouldn't have anybody. And so it's really beneficial, you know, the caring, the love, the everything we have for these families. It benefits them and it benefits us too, you know. And so just continuing, again, you know, the support, the love, the nourishment, the energy, being able to be there for them in the beautiful time in their life that they'll never forget who was there for them. Right. And so that's where, when we build these connections, and like Marn said, how many years later, you know, my first was 6 years ago, and she still messages me, you know, hey, just wanted to say hi, you know. So just, it's ongoing, you know. And then, you know, you're there to support one of the births, and then the next year or two, they're like, I'm having a baby again, I really want you to be there, you know. And so it's so beautiful that you're the one that they can go to, that they trust, that they think of you when it becomes like, you know, pregnancy, or, you know, because they trust you and confide in you so much. If they're having a situation, they still come to you. And so it's not just about us being there because they are, you know, having a baby, right? There's a lot more to it. And so again, just being that lifestyle, the person that they can, you know, go to, and, you know, we can hold on, we can, you know, even just a hug sometimes, you know, let's meet for coffee, you know, just being there, just hearing them. And so it's a beautiful journey, you know, for them to come to you, and you're the one that's being able to provide that for them. So yeah, I'm just blessed. It's so blessing. I thank Creator all the time.
I think that's all our questions. I think that was beautifully said. And did you guys have any questions for the audience or anything? No? Okay. Well,
Wanted to say,
Dania?
I just wanted to say thank you for the questions, and for being interactive and receptive and coming to this discussion with us. Yeah, there's a lot of discussions like this that are happening in our time, and it's just good to sit in community and circle with everyone who's interested or in support, or, you know, working alongside as allies. Yeah, so thank you all for coming, and thank you for all of your questions.
we just have the video that we're going to end off with. We'll present that now, and then we'll close the circle for everyone.
Ngana mai chigeta mi de shogo ke mai ni be water mi tungi sagi chipitene e kwe mi na abeno chance ka piece sagi chipisa ngengi chikap ma ban egana makota pina sut kina ke ko asha pikiwe magan Oma kitas kuni kanin nanik kina ke gosh ke education, health, law kina ke go me at go we utapina suin gajan katik.
We all have a role in and an obligation to bring back our traditions.
He gave me the gun answer with the money to Chiabati Siatik.
With midwifery, we encourage that bond between the mom and the baby, no matter what the situation is. We try to empower that mom to get in touch with those traditions and that traditional knowledge, whatever her beliefs are.
Aya ak panego ke ayawak ki nani siok ngotinga ak kauta pinau soat yuete. Umani noint kabon siang diskonekane naning subskos biogang. Panego ke ashoka poek kakikisko sonete emchenaka che awat. Uke aya nawa kikchi nanta mokkina ke ko skeke we kina mai kina non tam utis ki apenonji ki pangisnenik.
Skemi wain goting gipianto mark chibon target tabenonji. Chipati ka wa tabenonji ke kita. Kusi tension we pintagen nian kita. Hogish kita na we ko kinawat na benonji. Amatsin ke gashke agen kini jokenek. Hogish ke ana benonji ne ko kinawat. Miski ko kontaget. Mi besukunut no kana go tabenonji ikiat. Kiitti panisseeni kyllä ei aveti kyllä ei onnakis maailmatta sitten panisseeni jotenkin penonsi oiskit oikeasti hankin nää penonsi en minä he kitsukan maat miökään mikä kautta penassaat kyllä
Ngotin vuonna voi annoa niin chansen voi epsin taukin muskikki avu muki aina nimisomset niin hommaga ei suostote.
Kenägen den schnabensoin. Ne schnabensoin en dam. Voin schime. Voi gen doema. Kenas. Ne schnabensoin en dam. Voi gen do temenan. Ne kugenin asha gan do shata. Kautetean. Ne geni shchegen. No te sabume vagini chansia ngi igonan. Nishnabe so inan cheminin dog. She in the moment dog when in toteman away. Can you chance cautious?
You wish Godskabe saga mamma kreim skimut mai. Utta question että abin a. Bebiens mi önis Godskaben tagenik. Mi gas machi tutto että a midwife. No pemengo gisitun. Mi ötekä säätei. Ogenda kutun vasago kaji behak
Kenin mit tachok ni chansak mi hapteiken ni chansak kaishitaan kitchen tauken ni chansak me aweno kini shoken no kumakakin tautapinausoa mi oke kakutapinaut ni chansak Niishanigan ni chansak kakin taudiot ke kankin second way after birth basic show no komukik ken tananin en ke match it e ketun gengi on handam e kan nginep e ke yaw oen kyen stagnation
Nibo muskagionistut ugion denana että midwife skikkia vogem skikkia vognan miskasigi bitse puonem skuin että
skikkia vogiana gutenge ai koe toga ki musaamen skui hemorrhage toga ki musaamen skui me skikkia vogasin näin Tuik kenda nageistgead.
Kiajau, kenen on työtä muodet, kaikista maavat, kaikista kentä vakko kenen leisitgead, kun ne sijon kiopstunavat.
I think, because of our history, we had those things taken away from us. Residential school, 60 scoop.
Någon ei syöbak. Tasko kionstumen miä.
It's a moral thing for me. I feel that the practice of midwifery, it's the mother and child connection when they say that upon conception, the spirit is in the child already. Now that's very sacred. Elders knew that. That's why they feel that midwifery is essential.
A woman used to give birth with, her grandma, her aunties, her cousins, her sisters, her friends surrounded, that big circle, that strong circle of women, and we don't have that anymore.
I think midwifery, that's a traditional practice. It belongs on the First Nations. That's our way of giving birth, and we should bring it back.
To learn about the Indian way of babies being born, the midwives doing that, as like doctors do.
I think that we need to start talking more about birth and pregnancy and breastfeeding, and I don't know many families that have that open dialogue where they can talk about healthy sexuality and what it means to be a woman and what those rites of passages are as you're growing up.
Yeah, I wish we could have that midwives caught up in our thought to come back. That's why I'm living today, but kind of no come up in it. That's 81 years ago. Thank you to her, and all the rest of the children that she brought into the world, delivering babies the Indian way.
She knew what I was talking about when I talk about traditions. The day that I went into labor, she went outside and she offered tobacco outside the hospital, and she said a prayer for me and my baby and my family, and that was just so powerful to know that my healthcare provider, she's taking care of everything in the hospital, but she also is taking care of that spiritual aspect. So that was very powerful for me.
We have what we need, and it's the vision and feeding that vision is what I believe is going to move this forward.
It's really encouraging to see that this project is happening, and that, as a young woman, I get to be with some elders that they recognize the power of midwifery and the power of giving birth the way that you want to, surrounded by your tradition, surrounded by people that have those teachings that can help you.
Thank you so much to all our panelists and for everyone joining us today. And thank you to the Kilila Birth Collective for an amazing discussion. It was great to learn about how you guys define Indigenous birth work and allyship, and how you bring in a lot of relational community aspects into your birthing collective. So just before we end the webinar, we would love to bring your attention to our upcoming Learning Circle events. Our next one is Relation to Research, Tradition, Knowledge in Academic Libraries. That's with Weewa Library on May 10th. And then we have Jordan's Principle and Information Session with Raylene McCreth on May 19th. And last but not least, Leaving a Legacy and Uplifting Cultural Safety on May 24th with Kathy Olmos and Cherie Mercier. Sorry about that. And all the webinars are free to sign up for on our website at www.learningsircle.ubc.ca. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.